You don't die on the battlefield. That's the first lie people tell themselves when they imagine medieval conquest. They picture fire, steel, screams, and then silence. But for many royal women, the moment the city gates fell was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a different kind of war, quiet, organized, and designed to last for years. You are not a soldier. You are a symbol. And when symbols are captured, they're not treated like ordinary prisoners. They are used. A conquered kingdom doesn't just lose land. It loses its memory, its future, its bloodline. And royal women, queens, princesses, noble daughters, often became the easiest way to rewrite everything. If you're here for the kind of history that school skipped, the part that makes your stomach tighten, stay with me. And if you want more dark, hidden stories like this, stories people still avoid, subscribe now, because what comes next gets worse, not better. When an army wins, it has two big problems. 1. How to stop rebellions. 2. How make the victory permanent. Medieval rulers understood something terrifying. You can crush an army in a day, but you might need a generation to crush a people. So after conquest, they didn't only build forts and execute leaders. They also targeted the royal women who survived. Because royal women carried something that swords could not destroy: legitimacy. A queen's marriage could create a new alliance. A princess could become the mother of a future king. A noble widow could become the center of resistance if she remarried the wrong man. Even a young girl with the right last name could become a banner for rebels. So conquerors didn't just imprison these women. They managed them. First came separation. After a city fell, royal women were often taken from their homes quickly, sometimes in the same night. They might be moved before dawn, before loyal servants could gather, before anyone could organize a rescue. The goal was to cut them off from everyone who knew them and everyone who might help them. You are not taken like a person. You are taken like property. You may be forced onto a wagon with a few belongings, or you may be marched with guards on both sides, not because you are dangerous, but because your existence is dangerous. People could die for your name. Then came the stripping away. In court, clothing is not just clothing. It tells everyone who you are. It shows rank, family, wealth, and pride. Conquerors knew that if they could erase your appearance, they could begin erasing your identity. A captured royal woman might be forced to remove jewelry, crowns, or even family colors. Not because the conqueror needed the gold, though that happened too, but because the message mattered. Your old world is finished. Sometimes your hair is covered or cut. Sometimes your servants are removed, replaced with watchers loyal to the new ruler. Sometimes you are made to speak a different language, pray in a different way, eat unfamiliar food, follow unfamiliar rules. It is not integration. It is controlled. And it often happened in layers, like a slow poison. The first layer is fear. You may not know if your father is dead. You may not know if your brothers are hanging from city walls. You may not know if your mother is being marched behind you in chains. And that uncertainty is not an accident. Uncertainty keeps you obedient. It keeps you quiet. The second layer is isolation. Royal women were often kept in castles, convents, noble households, or guarded estates. On the outside, it could look almost comfortable. Warm rooms, meals served, clean dresses. But comfort is not freedom. You are watched when you walk. Your letters are read or never delivered. Your visitors are approved or turned away. Your prayers may be supervised. Your schedule may belong to someone else. The third layer is erasure. Conquerors understood that killing a royal woman could sometimes make her a martyr. A dead princess becomes a story. A dead queen becomes a holy symbol. But a living queen kept silent, living far away, living under a new name, that's different. That's how you erase a dynasty without spilling blood in public. So instead of execution, they used soft disappearance. Your title might be removed. Official records might stop using your name. Coins and proclamations might act as if you never existed. Chroniclers, people who wrote the official history, might describe you as unimportant or sinful or weak or simply not worth mentioning. And if you were too famous to erase completely, they could rewrite you. They could call you the conquered woman who accepted her new place. They could describe you as grateful. They could claim you married willingly. They could say you converted happily. The story is made to sound clean. But behind the clean story is a brutal truth. Survival often meant a longer punishment. Now comes the part people rarely say out loud. After conquest, royal women were often forced into assimilation. That could mean being compelled to marry into the conquering side, sometimes to the ruler, sometimes to his son, sometimes to a loyal noble. The marriage wasn't romance. It was a strategy. If you're married to the conqueror's family, your old claim to power is used to strengthen his new claim. Your body becomes a bridge between the old kingdom and the new one. And a bridge is not asked if it agrees. In many cases, the marriage also served another purpose, to prevent rebellion. If you are bound to the new regime, your former allies may hesitate. They may fear hurting you. They may fear hurting your future children. They may even begin to believe resistance is useless, because now your bloodline is being redirected. Sometimes the goal was not to keep your bloodline alive. Sometimes it was to absorb it until it no longer existed as its own thing. A royal woman could be turned into a political tool in the most personal way possible, by making her the mother of heirs for the conquering power. Think about what that means. Your children may inherit a throne that once belonged to your family, but under the conqueror's name. Your children may be raised speaking the conqueror's language, praying the conqueror's prayers, learning the conqueror's history. Your children may be taught that your old people were barbarians or traitors, and you may be forced to smile while it happens. Because if you resist, the punishment can be quiet and endless. A woman who refused could be locked away in a convent, not always for holiness, but for removal. She could be declared unfit. She could be accused of disloyalty, adultery, witchcraft. She could be separated from her children. She could be kept alive, but made powerless until her name fades naturally. That kind of cruelty doesn't need a sword. It only needs time, and time is what conquest has. So when people speak only about violence in the moment of invasion, they miss the darker reality that followed, the organized afterlife of conquest, the long system, the slow cage, the life where you're still breathing, but everything that made you is being peeled away. One rule, one order, one forced choice at a time. And the scariest part is this. The conquerors often believed they were being reasonable. They called it politics. They called it peace. They called it uniting kingdoms. But for the women inside the story, it could feel like living funeral rites performed every day. Now imagine you've survived the first shock. The city is gone. The banners are torn down. The men who guarded the gates are dead or missing. You have been moved to a new place, surrounded by strangers who speak carefully around you. You are alive, and everyone treats your survival like a favor. This is where the real trap closes. Because after medieval conquest, a royal woman's life often became a slow process of ownership, legal, social, and deeply personal. Not always in a single violent moment, but through rules, marriages, and arrangements that were designed to control your future. And the most valuable thing about your future was simple, what you could produce. Heirs, bloodlines, legitimacy. In medieval politics, power wasn't only held with armies. It was grown inside family trees. And royal women were the roots that could be replanted into a new empire. So after conquest, one question often mattered more than your comfort, your consent, or your grief. Who will you belong to now? Forced marriage after conquest was not a rare accident. It was a plan. A conquering ruler might marry a conquered queen to claim her kingdom, or he might marry her to a brother, a cousin, or a trusted warlord, someone who needed status, land, and a powerful claim. To outsiders, it could look like a peaceful solution, a wedding instead of more war, a veil instead of blade. But don't be fooled. In many cases, the wedding was just conquest wearing clean clothes. Because what is a forced marriage, really? It is a conquest that continues inside a home. And once you are married into the conquering side, the world's sympathy often dries up. People stop seeing you as a victim and start calling you the new wife. They talk about stability. They talk about diplomacy. They talk about unity. Meanwhile, you may be sleeping in the enemy's castle, eating at the enemy's table, and being expected to produce children who will help erase your old world forever. That expectation could be relentless. If you did not become pregnant, your position could become dangerous. A royal woman who did not produce heirs could be pushed aside, replaced, accused, punished. In a political marriage, affection didn't protect you, results did. And pregnancy itself could become a kind of prison, because your body was no longer just your body. It became a public object with private suffering. Your health mattered only because it carried something valuable. Your pain was tolerated as long as the child survived. Your fear was ignored as long as the dynasty continued. Even your relationships could be weaponized. If you had children from the old regime, sons especially, they could be seen as threats. A boy with the wrong bloodline could become a rallying point for rebellion. So conquerors often controlled these children tightly. Sometimes they were taken from their mothers to be raised by the conqueror's people. Sometimes they were held as hostages. Sometimes they disappeared quietly. Sometimes they were educated into loyalty until they no longer remembered who they were. And what could a mother do? If you protest too loudly, you risk losing them faster. If you stay silent, you watch them drift away anyway. This is one of the darkest truths. Conquest didn't only steal women's freedom. It often stole their motherhood. And it did it in a way that looked proper from the outside. Now let's talk about the forced assimilation that followed. Assimilation wasn't just about learning new manners. It was about turning the conquered into proof that the conqueror was right. If you were a royal woman, people watched you closely. They wanted to see if you would kneel, if you would convert, if you would adopt their customs, if you would stop mourning. Every public moment became a test. Smile at the wrong time, and you look disloyal. Don't smile, and you look ungrateful. Either way, you lose. The conqueror could also use religion as a tool. If you were forced to convert, it wasn't only about faith. It was about declaring that your old kingdom's identity was wrong enough to be replaced. And once you convert publicly, your people may feel abandoned. They may feel betrayed. They may feel as if the last living symbol of their nation has been turned into an enemy. So you become trapped between two sides. The conqueror owns your life. Your people judge your survival. That is psychological pressure, and it's meant to break you. Now here is something even more disturbing. In some cases, royal women were not just forced into marriage. They were forced into breeding politics, where the goal was not companionship but production. That word is ugly, but it fits, because the woman was treated like a living stamp of approval. Her womb was the seal that made conquest official. And when a conqueror wanted to erase a bloodline, he could do it in a twisted way. Not by killing the woman, but by making sure her children carried the conqueror's name, culture, and loyalty. A bloodline can be destroyed without ending it. It can be redirected until it belongs to someone else. That's why survival could feel like betrayal, even when it wasn't. And sometimes, the royal woman was forced to help in her own erasure just to stay alive. Now, picture the daily life. You may be given fine clothing, but you don't choose where you go. You may eat well, but you don't decide who touches you. You may be called lady, but your letters are monitored. You may appear at court, but only when you are useful. You may be kept alive, but always reminded that your life can be changed with one order. Even the smallest choices can be taken. What you wear, when you pray, who you speak to, what language you speak to your own child. And there is another part that history often hides, the constant threat of replacement. If you're a conquered queen, your conqueror might keep you until a better option appears. A nouvelle alliance, a younger bride, a political marriage that brings more land. You can become outdated, and when you become outdated, you become vulnerable. Some royal women were sent away to monasteries, convents, or isolated estates, not always as punishment, but as disposal. A quiet removal so the court can move on without messy bloodshed. Think of it like this. You're not executed because death would make you powerful. You are kept alive because life can make you invisible. That is the system. And when you live inside it long enough, it changes the way you think. You may start to speak less. You may start to perform obedience as a survival skill. You may start to treat your own emotions like dangerous secrets. Because in that world, grief is suspicious. Anger is deadly, and hope can get you killed. By now, you understand something brutal. The conquest didn't end when the fighting stopped. It moved indoors. It moved into paperwork, religion, marriage beds, nurseries, and history books. And this is where the darkest part begins. Not the taking, but the rewriting. Because once a royal woman was captured and controlled, the conqueror still had one final problem. How do you make the world forget she ever had a right to rule? How do you erase a queen without killing her? You erase her in the place that lasts longer than life. Memory. In medieval times, history was often written by the winners. That means the official record wasn't just a report of what happened. It was a weapon, a tool to shape what people believed. So if you were a conquered royal woman, the conqueror could do something almost worse than imprisonment. He could steal your story. First, your name could be reduced. Instead of being called Queen of, you might be called the widow, the foreign woman, the captive, or the disgraced one. Titles mattered. When titles disappear, authority disappears with them. Next, your choices could be rewritten. If you were forced into a political marriage, the story might claim you accepted it. If you were pressured into conversion, the story might claim you did it joyfully. If you were kept alive under guard, the story might call it protection. Words can clean blood off hands. And then comes character destruction. Royal women who symbolize the old regime were often painted as morally corrupt. Because if the public believes you were corrupt, they stop believing you deserve loyalty. So chroniclers might describe you as seductive, manipulative, arrogant, or cursed. They might imply you brought ruin to your own people. They might blame you for rebellion. They might whisper that you practiced forbidden rituals or broke religious rules. It's easier to justify conquest if the conquered seem wicked. It's easier to justify control if the captive seems dangerous. In some cases, your suffering itself could be used against you. If you became quiet and withdrawn, they called you weak. If you resisted, they called you treasonous. If you tried to protect your children, they called you controlling. No matter what you did, the story could be shaped to punish you. Now let's talk about the most painful part of erasure: separation from legacy. A royal man could leave behind a clear trail: battles, laws, castles, decrees. A royal woman's legacy was often more fragile. It lived in family lines, alliances, and motherhood. So conquerors attacked those things directly. If you had children, the conqueror could claim them. He could rename them. He could change their religion. He could place tutors and guards who taught them to admire the conqueror and distrust their mother's past. And sometimes, the mother herself was treated like a contamination risk. Imagine holding your child and knowing this. The court is watching to see what you teach them by accident. A word in your native language. A lullaby from your homeland. A prayer you whisper without thinking. Anything could be seen as planting rebellion. So you are pressured to become the kind of mother who raises children away from herself. You become a mother whose love must be filtered. A mother who must be careful with her own memories. This is how conquest reaches into the brain. It trains you to police your own heart. And for many royal women, the psychological pressure was the point. The conqueror didn't need you to love him. He needed you to stop belonging to anyone else. That's why courts often demanded performances. Public appearances where you stand beside the conqueror. Ceremonies where you dress in the conqueror's style. Religious events where you are seen praying the correct way. Feasts where you sit where you are told and smile when the room expects it. If you refuse, you risk punishment. If you obey, you risk being viewed by your own people as a symbol of surrender. So you live in a no-win space. Survival can look like collaboration. And conquerors used that. They wanted your people to feel hopeless. They wanted your people to think, even she accepted it, even though she is part of them now. That is how you break resistance without another battle. Now, in some cases, royal women were not assimilated into the conquering court. They were removed entirely. This is the quiet ending many never hear about. You could be placed in a convent, not as an honored religious choice, but as a political storage room. A safe place to keep you alive where you cannot gather supporters, cannot remarry, cannot produce heirs, cannot create alliances. A living lock. You could also be married off far away to a minor noble, far from your homeland, far from any loyalists. You become a person who exists but doesn't matter. And if you were too risky, too loved, too remembered, too capable, your life could become smaller and smaller. Fewer visitors, fewer letters, less freedom to travel, more guards, more rules, less air. Some women died this way, not by execution, but by slow disappearance. Illness, loneliness, childbirth complications, depression, accidents. The sources might not say much. That silence is part of the violence, because silence is what erasure sounds like. Now step back and look at the larger picture. When a royal woman is captured after conquest, the goal is not only to hurt her. The goal is to use her as a tool to end a world. Her marriage can seal the conquest. Her children can inherit a stolen throne. Her conversion can weaken her people's identity. Her rewritten story can teach future generations that her dynasty was never worth saving. This is why the after is so dark. Because it is methodical. It is planned. It is political cruelty done with clean hands. And it leaves a moral stain that lasts longer than the conquerors themselves. Now, here's the moral echo, the part that sticks in your chest. When we talk about medieval conquest, it's easy to imagine monsters in armor and think that was a different time. But systems like this don't belong to one century. The idea of controlling women to control nations, the idea of rewriting victims into willing participants, the idea of erasing people by erasing their stories. Those patterns don't vanish. They change clothing. So when you hear the romantic version of medieval history, noble kings, grand castles, glorious victories, remember the hidden cost paid in silence, locked rooms, forced names, and stolen children. The darkest part of conquest was not only what happened to the dead, it was what happened to the living. If this story holds your attention and you want more episodes that expose the brutal truths behind glory, hit like and comment one word, erased. It tells me you can handle the real history, and it helps this video reach others who are looking for it. And if you want the next dark story, another chapter they never taught, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because once you start seeing history this way, you can't unsee it.